Abyss is the newest map in Valorant that has players scratching their head, not knowing exactly what to do and how to play it. That being said, in this video, we're going to give you insights, tips, and tricks, and everything you need to know to master Abyss as quickly as possible so you can stop dipping out on this map and start enjoying it, winning games, and climbing your elo. We're going to split up this map into sections of attack and defense on different sites so that you understand it on a fundamental level and you have tips and tricks to back that up. Now, first off, we're going to talk about defense, and we're actually going to start with B site. B site is incredibly hard to hold for a singular person. There's really only one position that a player can play if they want to stay on site, and that's underneath the little bridge, and you are pretty much going to die here if enemies dump you with utility and flush you out. This makes it incredibly difficult to play solo here. That being said, if you can do a mid-site smoke, it can help you play off of it and even flush out of sight after the fact. Now, one of the things I'll tell you is that Abyss is very retake oriented, and B site is no different to that, but you need to make sure that you maintain control of areas that allow you to retake from, so you don't have to spend extra utility trying to retake the areas that you then want to use to take the site. So this means places like Heaven and anywhere near Aqua. These areas need to be kept control of because they're super hard to retake if enemies get control of these areas or you give up all information, and enemies that are playing in these areas can easily force you to dump utility into them, meaning you won't have it to take site, which is going to be really difficult. Now, one thing that you could do as a defensive person is hold long-range safe angles for info. Angles that don't commit you completely to a fight, but allow you to make sure that there are long lanes where enemies are not there, and you can quickly reiterate information to your team. Because remember, Abyss is a really big map, so it's really hard for your teammates to rotate. So the faster you can get info and tell your team to rotate up, the easier it will be for y'all to play retake, the more time y'all will have, especially when a lot of the meta in the retake situation for the attack side is to spam utility, play off site, and basically keep spraying the bomb. So the more time you have, the easier it's gonna be for you to actually win that, because you need to be able to exhaust all the utility, and that's really the secret. Is anything you can do to help your team retake faster is gonna be the thing that puts you over the edge and allows you to win the round. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that you can't always hold site, but what I would say is that you need to decide whether or not you're going to fight or retake, not both. Like, as an example, if you and another person are playing B site defense and you decide that you kind of want to split the difference, both of y'all want to fight a little bit and then maybe try to retreat, the person that's playing on site doesn't have a clear way to get out of sight, for one, and if y'all die and then give up those powerful angles, Heaven, Aqua, things like that, your people that are rotating from the other side are going to have a insanely hard time trying to retake that space. So it would have been far better for you to just live, back up, hold that space, and then set up for a potential retake with your team. So if you're gonna fight, you need to invest utility, you need to actually try to get picks, you need to actually try to win the fight, not just half commit, half not commit. It's either fight or retake. Try not to dip your toes in both because you're more likely to fail. But regardless of how you play Abyss, you're really gonna struggle if you don't have great aim. There are really long sight lines and many places where you're gonna have to take 50-50 gun duels, and having the better aim is gonna really help you win a lot more on this map in particular. And our SkillCapped Aim God course has everything you need to quickly get better and better aim, from peaking to challenging to warm-up routine and crosshair placement. Everything that you could possibly need to become an amazing aimer is just a click away, and with our money-back guarantee, you don't climb, you don't pay. So check it out right now down below. Now, similar to B side defense, A side defense is going to be really hard to hold on site, but back of site does give you a bit more options, because unlike playing B back of site where it's really hard for you to cross and get out, back of site A gives you opportunity to leave the site if you get flushed out with utility, so it's a bit easier. Now, that being said, if you're playing front of site, you're pretty much all in committed because there's not really a clean way for you to get out. So you're either gonna challenge aggressively and win a lot of gun duels and get advantage trades, or you're gonna die and basically just be all in committed to a fight around this area. Just not a great clean way to get out, period. That being said, A main is a lot more contestable on defense than B main is, because you only have one area that enemies could come from, rather than B main where they could come from window and they could come from the lane. Now, in addition to that, if you are an opper, which opping is fantastic on Abyss and really powerful, and take an aggressive line that is a little bit pushed forward, you can gather extra information and hold that line so that any rotations back you'll be able to punish really easily, and this really allows the rest of the people on the other parts of the map holding to be a lot more loose with their positioning. They have a lot less pressure on them because they know that you are denying that entire execute and the space that they would need in order to execute. And this is a really important lesson here. Taking a risk to control a certain certain lane, it's gonna make the rest of the map easier to hold for your team. Now, really similar to B site, A site, you cannot lose CT in particular because it makes retake so damn difficult. And this, to an extent, applies to Heaven as well. You really want to have control of these areas so that you can use utility and dump utility back on site and be able to clear out all that space, and then be able to weather the storm out on a lot of the utility that people playing off site is going to dump onto the spike. But if you have to invest all your utility in order to take control of CT or Heaven, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to take site control fast enough for you to be able to have enough time to stall out all their utility. You see how keeping control of this space is very, very important, and that's why it's really punishing for you to make a play and just die right off the rip. So keep that in mind. Now, we do got to talk about attack, and I'm actually going to connect A and B site attack a little bit because both of these sites are easier to take for attackers. This map in general is a lot easier to take on attack and harder to defend, but it's easier to retake and it's hard to play post plant in some regards. Now, when you're taking B, it's really easy for you to take site control because there's really only one place they can play if they're playing on site, and then they're typically playing off site. That being said, when your team uses crowd control or some form of flash, you need to make sure that someone is jiggle peeking or hard peeking danger lane so that an enemy can't stay there, because if you flush enemies to that side, then enemies are going to be able to play around that and kill you. And you got to keep in mind that anyone that's playing behind site, back of site right there, they don't want to cross all the way back to Aqua because they're going to die majority of the time. So they really want to go down on the side of danger, and that's what you really need to punish. Now, granted, you got to make sure that you don't challenge this too early because you don't want the person that is going to clear danger dead before the entry happens. So you want to make sure that you're timing your peak with the utility that your team dumps onto the person that could be playing in that area. Now, in post plant situations, this can be a nightmare for a defender to try to come and defuse because you're going to plant in a space that you can easily shoot and spray through and dump utility. But one of the most common tactics that we saw at VCT is leaving one player on an island and then the rest of y'all go back and play spray and utility dump to deny the defuse. So the reason that you leave one person on the island is that it can force enemies to clear this space, right? Because there's only one person there. You're not investing your entire team, but just a limited resource to potentially play up. And you really want to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it forces enemies to flush you out with utility. Number two, you can get extra bits of information. Number three, you can potentially make a hero play. And number four, you can stall for time, which is going to allow your team to spam more and use utility to deny the defuse. So all these reasons are reasons that you would put someone on an island. And typically there's going to be a lot of plays we'll talk about later where you deposit a player in a really powerful position and it really forces enemies to do extra things in order to flush them out or play around them that they really just don't have the time to do. Now, you got to make sure that you're not playing everyone on site. This is a really common mistake that happens in a lot of A and B site hits where your entire team will just flood onto site. But you got to recognize that there are limited areas on the map that are good positions. There's very few good positions in general. So you have the space for like one or maybe two people, but putting your whole team there makes it really easy for enemies to just retake site because one flash is going to get all of y'all. One piece of utility is going to flush all of y'all, and you would much rather play the majority of your force off site, playing for post plant sprays, post plant utility, and just denial of the defuse instead of fighting for control of site. But if you do want to fight for control of site, then you need to go fight for control of the setup areas. So places like Aqua, places like Heaven, places like CT. If you don't have control of these, then I want a lot of y'all to be playing off a site, playing default main and spamming that spike. But if you can't get control of these, then you can push up, and then there's more strong areas that your team can occupy, and it's easier for you to control the funneling of where enemies are coming to retake from. Now in mid, let's talk about mid defense. If you're playing direct back of middle where you could peek on the left and right side down the lanes, I wouldn't suggest holding this position unless you have a smoke, a dash, or some way to get out. You can hold it if you have a teammate, but the problem is if enemies push up on this position, then you're kind of trapped back here. They're going to use some form of utility to force you out, and then when you dip left or right, you're going to take a bad gun duel and just die. So you would really like it if you could like teleport away an Omen or something along those lines so that you can't get punished if enemies push up and flush you out. Now, mid in general though is really hard to take on defense, and as a defender, pushing up mid can be really, really risky because it's too easy to get timinged if you don't have a lot of info. If let's say you have a KO knife and it knifes everyone A main, then yeah, you can push up mid, play aggressive, and potentially make a flank play. But if you don't know where everyone's at, there's just way too many places that people could be, way too hard for you to actually clear them all out, especially if you're trying to be silent. So it's oftentimes a position that you want to hold and deny, not necessarily a position that you want to aggressively take on defense unless you have great info. Now, for attackers, one of the most important things you need to do in general on Abyss is force opponents to respect you in mid somewhere. Making it so that defenders cannot rotate through mid without fear is incredibly important, because if they have to go the long way through CT, it's just gonna take forever. In addition to that, from mid, there's a lot of really powerful positions that you could take. Like, as an example, smoking off the lane, taking vent, and putting an insert player in there, because someone that plays in vent has info all the way on A site, can cut off rotations, and is really frustrating for someone defending A to play around, because they don't know if they're ever going to get pushed, and there's just a lot of awkwardness that is created. And this is really good for attackers. And honestly, a lot of plays where you insert a player in a position where they get to gather info and cut off rotations or make a play from this location is super strong. And like, if you can get someone all the way deep mid, where we were talking about defending specifically through mid, that's like an auto win, because no one's going to be able to rotate through there. You're going to be able to apply a lot of pressure, and then enemies have to be second guessing every single corner they ever have to work through. It could be really frustrating. And yeah, mid is key. It's really important. Even if you don't take it, even if you don't push it as an attacker, you need to threaten the possibility that you're there. You got to understand that a lot of post plant is about forcing enemies to utilize their cooldowns before they're in a situation to take or retake back site. But last up, as far as compositions are concerned, there's really only two characters that are needed on this map, or pretty positive to be picked, and it's Jett. Jett is really strong on offense, taking space, and this map is really great with the op, so Jett is phenomenal. You could hold really long lanes with the op. Very op dominant map. And then Sova pairs really well with Jett, gathers great information. There's a lot of defensive and offensive darts you could do to flush people or potentially make a counterplay on them. So these two characters are kind of set in stone, but for the rest, there's not really a perfect solution, right? We see some double dome with some mid control. We see some Astra. We see some Omen. We also see some Viper in the mix with some Astra. We see different Sentinels, Gecko, KO. We see a lot of Cypher, but really we see a lot of different things going on with the rest of the comp. So I think Jett, Sova needed, but the other characters a little bit more room for experimentation. But anyways, I really hope that you learned a lot about how to play Abyss and some tips and tricks you can utilize to become better and more efficient on this map. Definitely let us know if you have any questions in the comments down below, and check out SkillCapped right here. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.